The year is 1754. The place, a dimly lit room reeking of sweat and ink in London. A map sprawls on an oak table, whispering promises of power like a siren to greedy men. This isn't just a piece of paper. It's a loaded gun. You see, this map was more than topographical lines and borders. It was a strategic blueprint, a serpent coiled to strike at the heart of the American colonies. The French and British, two power-hungry empires, were playing high-stakes poker with territory as the chips. And this map was the ace up their sleeves. But let's tear away the curtain of empire and examine the real engine here: raw greed. The British wanted to expand westward, driven not by some noble manifest destiny but by a thirst for land, furs, and resources. They were the gamblers at the table, staring at the map, calculating their next move, their eyes gleaming with avarice. Across the table, the French clung to their new world territories like a drowning man grasping at reeds. Their empire was slipping. They knew it. But they couldn't let go. The map was their lifeline, a tenuous grip on power that was slowly eroding. Their desperation was palpable, a silent scream echoing in that room of dark wood and ambition. And there it was, the map, a seemingly innocuous document, altering lines that would soon alter lives. A single change, a single stroke of ink, and the map dictated a new frontier. But this wasn't a mere cartographical update. No, this was a declaration of war in disguise, a catalyst for rebellion, a spark to the powder keg that was the American colonies. The die was cast. The players were set. All that remained was for the pieces to fall. The map that triggered a revolution wasn't carved in stone. It was crafted in silence, behind closed doors. The Proclamation Line of 1763. A seemingly neat line on a map, a border meant to keep settlers from spilling over the Appalachian Mountains. But this line wasn't just about peacekeeping. It was a chokehold, a leash on the restless colonists eager to expand. Enter the British Crown, the so-called benevolent overseer, but in reality, a paranoid overseer fearing the loss of control. London had its reasons, and they were as pragmatic as they were selfish. They needed to keep peace with Native American tribes, but more importantly, they needed to keep their colonies in check. A Western expansion meant more land, more wealth, and ultimately, more power slipping through their fingers. On the other side, the colonists were reacting like caged beasts. They saw opportunity beyond those mountains: land to farm, resources to exploit, wealth to claim. The Proclamation Line was their prison wall, and they were determined to break free. For them, the map wasn't a guide, it was a gauntlet thrown down by an out-of-touch monarchy. The internal enemy here was clear: blind ego from the crown and raw greed from the colonists. The British believed their authority was unassailable, while the colonists, fueled by ambition and a sense of entitlement, saw themselves as destined rulers of a new world. Both sides were marching headlong into a confrontation that neither fully understood nor anticipated. Meanwhile, in the shadows, the map silently orchestrated its chaos. It wasn't just a document but a ticking time bomb. The Proclamation Line was never meant to last, but it was enough to ignite the fires of rebellion. A single stroke of ink had set the stage for a revolution. The map didn't lie. It was the truth laid bare, a testament to human folly and ambition. Picture it. The year is 1775. Lexington and Concord. The first shots of the American Revolution ring out. But don't be fooled by the smoke and gunfire. This isn't just about muskets and minutemen. This is the culmination of a decade-old grudge, a festering wound from 1763's map moment. The sound of musket balls isn't just war, it's the echo of greed and ego finally exploding. In the colonies, the tension was palpable. Farmers turned soldiers, their faces hardened by years of resentment, their minds set on breaking the chains of the Proclamation Line. They weren't just fighting a war. They were reclaiming their freedom from a map that had told them where they could and couldn't tread. This was personal. This was vindication. The British, meanwhile, found themselves in a nightmare of their own making. They had dismissed the colonists' grievances as mere noise, a minor discontent easily quelled. Their arrogance was their Achilles' heel. They underestimated the power of that map, a single line that had drawn a rift too wide to bridge. Now, they faced an insurrection born of their own hubris. The point of no return came swiftly, unceremoniously. As the smoke cleared from Lexington and Concord, there was no turning back. The map had fulfilled its grim destiny. It had sown division, and now blood cemented those divisions into reality. The British Empire had gambled, and the stakes had come due. The colonies had turned from petulant children to armed adversaries overnight. In the end, the map's change was more than a tactical error. It was the catalyst for rebellion, a reckless gamble that exposed the fault lines of empire. What began as a quiet, ink-stained decision in London had spiraled into a full-blown revolution across the Atlantic. This was no mere oversight. This was history's way of proving that greed and ego, unchecked, are the deadliest of weapons. So here we are, standing amidst the ruins of what that map set in motion. The proclamation line of 1763 wasn't just ink on parchment. It was a powder keg, a countdown to chaos. The sanitized public myth would have you believe it was a benign protective measure. But we've peeled that myth back to reveal the raw, desperate reality. It was a leash, a shackle, and ultimately, a challenge. Behind the scenes, the British Crown operated under the illusion of control. They thought they could dictate the future with a flick of the quill. But that was their hubris talking, a blind ego that refused to see the colonies as anything other than extensions of their power. They played the tyrant in a colonial drama, never realizing they were writing themselves into a tragedy. The colonists, on the other hand, saw the map as a stone in their shoe, a constant irritant reminding them of their subservient status. It was their rallying cry, their evidence of oppression. A map that might have seemed innocuous became the symbol of everything they resented about British rule. It was the line in the sand, one they were more than willing to cross. The point of no return was marked not just by battles, but by minds irreversibly set against reconciliation. The map had done its work, sowing seeds of revolution in fields of discontent. The British watched as their colonial subjects transformed into revolutionaries, while the map's lines transformed into trenches. There was no going back. The ink had dried, and the rebellion had begun. The fatal error here? Ignoring the power of perception. The British thought they were managing a simple boundary dispute, but they underestimated the power of a single, calculated decision to galvanize a movement. The lesson? Never underestimate the impact of a seemingly small decision on human ambition. Maps can chart lands, but they can't chart the course of human will. As the dust settles on this historical battlefield, let's not mistake the map for just a relic of the past. Maps shape perceptions, and perceptions shape destinies. The proclamation line of 1763 wasn't just a line. It was a declaration of power and control. The British saw it as a solution. The colonists saw it as a challenge. One map, two perspectives, countless lives altered. The British, dazzled by their own supremacy, believed they could draw boundaries without consequences. Their failure was in thinking maps could control hearts and minds. They forgot that ambition doesn't recognize drawn lines, and rebellion doesn't respect them. The Crown's blind ego was its undoing, turning a governance tool into a revolutionary cause. For the colonists, the proclamation line was a catalyst. It symbolized everything they despised about an empire that saw them as second-class subjects. Their greed for land and freedom turned into a righteous fury, one that would burn until independence was achieved. This map was more than geography. It was a manifesto for rebellion, etched in ink and ignited by desire. The map's legacy is clear. A single stroke of ink can change the world. But the real lesson here isn't about cartography. It's about understanding the power of perception. Whether in 1763 or today, decisions made in ivory towers can ripple across time and space, reshaping societies. Never underestimate the power of a line on a map, or the people living beyond it. So next time you glance at a map, remember, it's more than paper and ink. It's a landscape of ambition, a battlefield of desires. The proclamation line was just one chapter in the never-ending story of human hubris and desire. Be wary of the lines you draw in your own life. They might just become the boundaries you can never cross back over. Now let's zoom out. The Revolutionary War ended centuries ago, but the echoes of that map's change are still very much alive in today's geopolitical game. Modern maps continue to dictate the pulse of power and conflict. If you think the lesson of the proclamation line is safely locked in history, think again. Every border dispute, every territorial claim, is haunted by the ghost of 1763's folly. Let's take a hard look at modern players, nations and leaders who wield maps like weapons. They draw lines with the same arrogance as the British in 1763, convinced of their mastery over the territory and its people. But history is a patient teacher, and it waits for the hubris to catch up, for the lines to blur and the consequences to unfold. Think about the South China Sea, where lines drawn on maps spark international tension. Or Kashmir, where borders are more than just lines, they're lifelines, dreamlines, fault lines. These maps aren't just about geography, they're about identity, power, and survival. Each stroke of ink carries the weight of history and the potential for future conflict. The proclamation line taught us that borders can be the breeding grounds for rebellion. But it also taught us something more: the danger of underestimating the human spirit's defiance of artificial constraints. The players change, the stage evolves, but the game remains the same. Power, greed, and ego are timeless adversaries, locked in an eternal dance with destiny. So, as we close the book on this tale of maps and miscalculations, remember, lines on a map are never just lines. They're the battlegrounds of ambition and resistance. In your own life, be wary of the lines you draw, whether in relationships, careers, or beliefs. They might define your world or confine it. History has shown us that the boundaries we create can be the very chains we seek to break. Let's step into the trenches of daily life, where maps aren't just for explorers. They're for everyone navigating the chaos of existence. Your career map, your relationship map, your moral compass, they're all charts in the expansive atlas of your life. Like the proclamation line, these maps are etched with ambition, hopes, and sometimes, the ink of arrogance. Ever made a decision that seemed small at the time, only to watch it ripple outward, altering the course of your life? That's the proclamation line effect. We all draw lines, limits, goals, boundaries, believing we control their implications. But lines have a funny way of taking on lives of their own, reshaping paths you never intended to wander. Just as the British misjudged the power of their map, we often misjudge the power of our decisions. The line between a dream and a downfall is razor thin. Ego whispers that we can handle it, that we're in charge. But control is an illusion, history's cruel joke. It's the lesson of 1763 whispered through the ages. Never underestimate the consequences of a single line. So, how do you navigate this tangled web of lines? First, recognize them for what they are: tools, not truths. Maps can guide, but they can also constrain. Question the lines you've drawn. Are they propelling you forward, or holding you back? Like the colonists, sometimes you need to defy the lines to find freedom. As we part ways, remember this: life's maps are written in erasable ink. You hold the quill. Every line is a choice, every boundary a question. Will it be your proclamation line, a limit set by fear and control? Or will it be a path to discovery, drawn with intention and courage? The choice is yours. Draw wisely.